If you've been on the hunt for an affordable alcohol marker, but you know that you will never use a chisel tip in your card making, then this video is for you. Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel, and recently Ohuhu asked me if I'd like to try out their alcohol markers, and I said yes, especially I wanted to try the ones with a brush and fine tip. So there is no chisel tip on this marker. I think this is the perfect combination for card makers, especially for beginning alcohol marker colorists. The first thing I'm going to do is show you the markers, the tips, and the colors that came in this set. But I wanted to tell you that I do have a giveaway at the end of the video, so be sure to stick around until then to find out how to win. I am working with today the Ohuhu 120 color marker set. You can see it comes in this sturdy carrying case. It is flexible, but the straps are strong. There's a shoulder strap and a hand carry strap. Everything is really enforced and super strong, so it should hold up for a long time. There's a zipper opening and there's a little piece of plastic in here that says that if you're coloring on really thin paper, you can use this plastic to protect your work surface. So that's a really nice thing to have. And they do have swatches included in the set. And so I'm going to work on those so that I can get a feel for the markers. Now, first off, what I love about these markers are the tips. Here's the brush tip. It is a nice solid brush tip. It's got a nice thin point that you'll be able to get really fine lines with, but there's also a fine tip, which is a bullet tip. It's a much harder tip, and I love that for small areas or small images. So I'm going to use the brush end to swatch out all the different colors in this set so that you can get a feel for what's included in the 120 marker set. And I really like the variety of colors in this set. I didn't feel like it was lacking in anything really. There were a whole bunch of yellows, some browns, there were oranges, pinks, and purples, blues, greens, the works. The only thing I would say I felt like I had to kind of mix and match some colors with were skin tones. So you can see there's some really light reds that you can use for some skin tones, but there wasn't kind of a darker skin tone or a light brown skin tone. But you can make it yourself by mixing and matching some of those colors, and I'll show you that later on in the video. There are also grays, there's a colorless blender, and I'll show you, I use that a couple of times in today's video as well. So this is a really great starter set for somebody to try out alcohol markers and really get a feel for them. Now that you've seen the markers, let's try them on a few different cards. I have some critter stamps, some flower stamps, and some small character stamps as well. I'm going to start with the flowers, and I have 3 different reds that I'm showing you right here. So I am going to use the brush tip with these flowers because the flowers are very large. You want on your larger areas to use the brush end for sure. The fine point end is more for your smaller areas and for detailed lines, things like that. So I'm going to start with the brush end, and I'm going to put the lightest red down. Then I'm going to take the medium color that I've chosen, and I'm going to go same brush strokes about halfway up, and I left the very end of the petal white. That's going to be my highlight. So the brightest area is going to be on the tips of the petals. Then I'm going to go in with my darkest color, and I'm going to do about half of the medium. So I'm going smaller and smaller with my brush strokes. I'm going to go back in with the medium and wipe away the harsh lines of the dark. And then I'm going to go back in with the lightest color, and I'm going to wipe away the harsh lines of the medium. So I'm just going to go over them in brushstroke form until the harsh lines disappear and blend together. This is just a really easy way to do a 3-color petal. Now, you can see that I am doing 1 petal at a time. I highly recommend that. I also recommend a good alcohol marker paper. I like working on the Heffy Doodle alcohol marker paper. I find it to be the best for me. If you have something that works for you, great. If you haven't found something that works for you, or if you have trouble blending, try the Heffy Doodle and see if that really helps. It really helped me get better blends. So I decided that I wanted some of those stamped lines on the flower to be that darker color as well. So I went back in to the other petals with the darker color and just did some really fine lines of the darker color over those stamped lines. So a lot of times stamped images will give you a really good idea of where the darker color should be. You can see at the center or the ends of the petals, the middle of the petals, close to the center of the flower, there's a lot of lines. That sort of indicates to you that those are darker areas. For the center of the flower, I'm going to do dots with the brush end. These are going to be larger dots than I can achieve with the fine end. So I'm going to do a darker color with the fine nib and add some darker dots, just little bits here and there, just to give little accents to that flower center. This is a really easy way to do a two-color blend for a flower center. I'm going to do a two-color blend for these leaves, and I'm going to use the fine nib for the leaves because they are super skinny, they're super tiny. If you have good control, you could definitely use the brush end. That's totally up to you. For me, even getting into these little areas, I like to use that fine nib so I don't color outside the lines too much, and because I feel like I have more control over it. So I'm going to put the lightest color down first, then I'm going to put some of the darker color, and I'm not going to go as far. Again, the very ends of the leaves are still white. Those are going to be colored in last so that they remain the lightest part of the leaf. That's going to be the highlight. So then I just scrub out the harsh lines between the dark color and the light color and finish off by coloring over that white area. So I like to color over that white area as little as possible. If you can just do 1 or 2 strokes over it to fill it in, that's going to keep that area the lightest of the image. And that's going to really add a gradient of light and dark to your images, which really is what adds the interest. And that's what everybody's looking for, that depth, that dimension, that interest with alcohol markers. And they can really achieve it really easily with these Ohuhu markers, because there are so many colors available and there's lights and darks available, and they're so easy to use with the 2 different nibs. So now let's do an orange flower. These are actually Cosmos. This stamp set is from Waffle Flower, and again, I love that the stamp itself shows you where the darkest parts should be, and there are some lines to indicate kind of folding of the petal or little lines or wrinkles in the petal, and that is where you can add some of the darker color in as well. I'm going to do the same thing with a yellow. The thing about coloring in flowers is that they can be any color your imagination desires. So you can look up the flower that you're coloring online and get images for it, and that will give you color combination ideas. Or you can just go with your imagination. I had kind of a color palette in mind here. I love that light pink, orange, light orange, and a yellow color combination. So I thought I would recreate that on my flowers. For the bud, I'm going to have it be a little bit darker. I'm going to go for a red, but it's kind of a light red. So I think the buds tend to be a little bit darker than the petals once they've opened up. I'm starting with the brush tip. The other thing that's great about a brush end is it's easy to do a rounded shape. So you could see how I was going around the lines on the edge of that bud, and it's real easy to go around a nice round shape with a brush end and just do that brush stroke in a circular or semicircular motion. And then I am going to color in with lighter color to blend out that darker color. I'm going to do the 2 colors of green that I've done for the leaves before. I like to stick with the similar greens for all the stems. It kind of gives consistency to the card if all the stems have the same color, and then there's sort of a color combination for the flowers if you're not doing the same color for all the flowers as well. Again, you can use a combination of brush tip and fine tip for those tiny little leaves. I think it just is easier to use the fine tip. I like the brush end of this marker though, because it is fine enough and strong enough to really create a nice fine brush stroke. Now let's move on to some character stamps. I am starting with the background elements, the trees, the mountains, things like that. And I'm going to use a dot technique for the tree stumps. I'm starting with a warm gray. I'm just doing dots all around the tree stump, and then I'm going in with a brown, doing some brown dots, and then I'll go back in with the warm gray and cover all those dots up again. And that'll give me a nice combination of brown and warm gray. Then I'm going to do some green. I'm going to start with a dark green, and I'm going to follow along the lines of the different trees. So this one has dots, so I'm going to do dots again. The other one had kind of little scallops, and the first one had stripes. So just whatever the stamp was, I followed along with that. Now for the little lake with the mountains, I am going to do a traditional brush stroke from side to side. I'm leaving the center, the lightest part, and I'm just going to blend out the two colors together. For the mountains, I am going back to that warm gray and brown, only this time I'm doing the brown at the tops of the mountains underneath the snow caps, and then blending out the brown into the warm gray down below. For the snowmen, instead of just leaving them bright white, I'm going to use a very, very light BG to just add dots all around. That's going to kind of add texture. You know how when you look at snow, it has glistens and sparkles and things like that. So these little dots are trying to mimic that. I'm going to use two different colors to do that. I mentioned the skin tones before, so I am going to just color in each face with a different color that looked like it was meant to be skin tones. And when I felt like they were all too similar, I do add a couple of extra colors to two of the faces to give them a little bit of a different look and to add some different skin tones to this mix. So maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there were tones that were supposed to be skin tones, but I wasn't sure. So I just decided to mix and match a couple of colors to add some darker skin tones to them. For the hats, the tights, the skirts, the shirts, I'm going to color them in and then use that outline technique where you just add the dark color around the outline of the image and then to any lines that are in the image itself. So you can see the little tutu skirt has got some lines where there's folds or pleats in it. I would add the dark color to those as well as to the outside, and then go back in with that lighter color just to blend out that harsh line a little bit. You can see, I still can see it a little bit, but at least it's a little softer. So it gives, again, that look that you did a lot of blending and such, but you really didn't. It was just one or two colors and you're just adding those outlines. It's a really easy way to make them look like you've done some complicated coloring, even though you really haven't. And I like that you can just use two colors to do that, a lighter color, a darker color, and then go back to your lighter color to kind of blend out that harsh line, but just use those two color combinations and it kind of gives you a lot more to work with then, especially with 120 markers. That's a lot of different colors. I wanted these all kind of bright and happy and just fun colors, so each kid kind of got their own color combination. I have a pink outfit, a purple outfit, a teal outfit, a blue outfit. That was a lot of fun for me. I like having each kid contained to one color. It just made it a lot easier. I was really happy with how these little characters turned out. I think this is the best I've ever done with characters. Okay, for the last set, we're going to do critters. This is a Lawn Fawn stamp set, and it's got a cat and a dog, and then a whole little Christmas scene where they are sleeping under a Christmas tree near the fireplace and dreaming of their presents. So I'm going to start with the fire and basically color it in with the nib, then go in with red and color it in on the outline so that it looks like two different colors in the flame. For the rest of the fireplace, I'm going to use the brush end. I'm doing two different colored reds to create the brick look. And again, I am using the center as the point that is going to be the brightest point. And it makes sense because the fire is going to be in the center there. So again, doing the lightest color towards the middle, leaving the middle white, then doing the darker color, and then scrubbing out those harsh lines with the lightest color again, just using two colors and still getting that look of blending. For the inside of the fireplace, I'm just using a warm gray and I'm just going to color it in. I'm not going to do any blending or anything like that. I'm not going to get fancy. I'm going to then color in the base of the fireplace with a dark brown and a medium brown. For the rest of these little images, they're pretty small. So most of this is going to get colored in with the nib tip, the fine tip. And I am really happy with how they turn out, even with coloring with the fine tip. So anybody that tells you that you can only do good coloring with a brush tip, they're lying to you. So you can absolutely get some really cute coloring done by using these fine tips. And of course, you have the brush tip on the other end, so you could always combine the two. If you feel like you need that brush tip to add a little texture or add, just a little bit more of the stroke blending, then do that. Now I'm going to cut out everything that I colored in. I have 3 different sets of images to work with. I'm going to use pixie tape to hold the dies in place, and I'm going to die cut everything out all at once so that I can then put them together to make some cards. For the first background of the critter card with the Lawn Fawn stamps, I'm going to do some ink blending to create the background. I have Distress Oxide Uncharted Mariner, and I'm taping off a piece of the card because I'm going to have a different color for the wall and then a different color for the floor. Now, tape doesn't really stay on Distress Oxide ink, especially when it's still wet. So I used a piece of paper with some tape on the sides to mask off that bottom piece, and then I colored the bottom with lumberjack plaid. Now I have all my little pieces die cut and colored, and I'm using some liquid adhesive to hold them down because again, that Distress Oxide ink does not like adhesive like a tape runner. So definitely a little bit of strong liquid adhesive, and I'm going to place everything down in this scene. And it is so fun to now decorate this little scene. It reminds me again of color forms. I feel like we've talked about this in my videos before, but I loved color forms when I was a kid, and this reminds me of playing with color forms. So I have on the mantle the cookies and milk, stockings hung, and for the sentiment, I just grabbed the sentiments that were in the stamp set. I'm going to put a ton of anti-static powder tool on that Distress Oxide background, and I'm going to stamp the sentiments with the Stamp Market's white pigment ink. Now, that actually looks pretty good just by itself, but I decided to add white embossing powder on top just to heat set it so that it wouldn't smear, and I touch things way too early and I always end up smearing them. So it's always better for me with pigment inks to use some embossing powder on top. And look at how great that sentiment stands out. But I especially love all the little coloring of the little dog and cat and the tree. It was so much fun to do with these markers. For the next card, I'm going to use the flowers. I'm using a blending brush from the Stamp Market and some Stamp Market salmon ink, and I'm just doing a very, very light coloring in the center of this card. So you can achieve that kind of light coloring with that blending brush. I then embossed it with a Spellbinders embossing embossing folder to add texture to the background. And now I'm going to adhere down all of these flowers. So I'm going to use some foam adhesive, some liquid adhesive, and just kind of tuck things under each other. And I'm using a sentiment from a Simon Says stamp sentiment set, and I'm just going to adhere that down on top. This little guy was sticking out too much, so I put a little piece of foam tape behind him and just attached him to the flower. So last but not least, I am going to add some of the Nuvo Crystal, no, these are the Nuvo Dream Drops from Tonic Studios. I talked about them in my most recent video. They add a little bit of dimension and color and shine. For the card with the little skating characters, I decided to create an ice pond. So I cut out an oval of some kind of light blue cardstock, and then I'm using some Tim Holtz mica spray stain in Snow Flurries to just spray on top. And I like the textured look that it gives me. For the background, which is like the sky, I am going to tap some Dina Wakley Media Gloss in white all over the card to create some snowy background for our scene, because I think these kids are out in the snow skating, having a grand old time. So I'm going to put the mountain down first because you can see the side needs to be covered up there. I'm going to put the lake underneath, and then I'm going to put some trees in front. So the mountain is way in the back, the trees are closer, and the kids are even closer to us. And of course, those little snowmen at the bottom are even closer. So cute. So I was able to fit just about everybody except for that little snowman doing snow angels. I had to leave him, but maybe we'll use him in another card. I'm going to use a Sending Cheer sentiment from the Stamp Market. I stamped it, and then I'm going to die cut it out so that I can pop it up and place it right above this little scene. And again, I am so happy with the way these markers allowed me to color in these characters. It made me feel like I knew what I was doing, and I know it will help you as well if you're struggling. So I have to tell you, I am in love with these markers. I think they are so easy to use, especially for a beginner like myself. They make it really easy to get into small places, and they have beautiful colors that blend easily. And like a lot of you, I never used the chisel tip end of a marker, so these were a perfect combination for me. Now for the giveaway. If you don't mind a chisel tip on one end, I have an entire set, the same colors that I used in today's video, but with a brush and a chisel tip end. And I'd love to give away this set to one of you. So to enter to win, all of the details are in the YouTube description box below the video. It's not a requirement to enter, but I'd love for you to go over to the Ohuhu channel and thank them for sponsoring this giveaway. As always, I want to thank you so much for stopping by and spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon.